Hello, and welcome to Aparo's webinar. We are excited to have you here to learn about pivoting to remote service delivery and how others in the community are doing that. We are very grateful to have three speakers with us today who've been having different experiences with that pivot to remote services for their constituents. And I'm going to start today by asking them, well, first of all, what we hope to get out of today, for those of us on the line, is insights into what things have really worked well to pivot our services to a remote capacity, what hasn't, what's been impossible to do remotely, and so what we've done to navigate in those environments, and just give you an opportunity to have some Q&A. Just help give you an opportunity to have Q&A, and I will be monitoring the Q&A. My name is Kim Lanphier. I should start. And I am Aparo's CEO, and we are very grateful that you're here today to have community around these kinds of questions and learn from best practices for those who have done so. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and I notice that several of them are still on mute, so if you will unmute yourselves. We have Chuck Jones, Kathy Rogers, and Angela Woods with us, and I'm going to start in that order and ask them to introduce themselves, and just in case you don't know what their organization does, if you would say the name and what the mission is, what you look to accomplish in our community. We'll go Chuck, then Kathy, then Angela. Okay?
Hello, I'm Chuck Jones, and I'm Executive Director of Commonwealth Charlotte. We are an organization that provides trauma-informed financial capability building and access to financial services for low-income wage earners in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. We partner with about 53 different organizations, Mecklenburg County itself and the city of Charlotte, to provide our services, which include education, one-to-one counseling, and opportunity loans and access to banking products.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Rogers, Executive Director for Mental Health America of Central Carolinas, and our mission is to provide help, offer hope, and promote mental wellness in Charlotte and Cabarrus counties. We do this through advocacy, education, and prevention, teaching mental health first aid, QPR suicide prevention. We work closely with families and caregivers who have children with a behavioral, emotional, or mental health diagnosis. And we also work with adults who are living with severe mental illness in the community.
Good afternoon. My name is Angela Woods, and I am the CEO of Girl Scouts Hornets Nest Council here in Charlotte. I am one of 110 individual councils who all seek to promote girl leadership, provide access to all girls, and to build girls to be courageous, confident, and have character, and to make the world a better place. And so I'm very excited to be here to let you know what we're doing in this time of the pandemic.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us and sharing this with our community of nonprofits. As I mentioned to the panelists while we were setting up, we're expecting about 50 nonprofits to be on this call. Right now, they're about 35 at this point, but they usually trickle in a little bit later. So I want to start with Chuck and have you share a little bit about how you have seen. Let's start with your team. Let's have all of you start with your team and when this coronavirus really came down on our community, which was in mid-March, what you saw happen and how you've navigated your team, your internal team, and them adjusting to this new normal over the last several weeks. Chuck?
Well, we planned, we started planning about 2 weeks before going remote, and fortunately we had some tools in place to do that, but my team was we're such a face-to-face with our clients' organization that it was a stretch for us to think about how we would do this. But what we were able to do is come up with a plan. Each of us had a personal plan, and we had a organizational plan for how we were going to go remote. And so everyone kind of was prepared to do it. Of course, those plans almost went out the window immediately when we started. but we were able to leave our office on March 16th, and we were fully operational and remote on March 17th. And the team has done very well. We're actually highly productive this way, which makes me think about how we're going to do this in the post-COVID era. We've learned a whole lot, but the team has adjusted very well, I think.
Chuck, we've had the same experience, and I love how you say, you know, we've learned, because certainly we have. Won't this be interesting to think about how much of what we do might become remote? Angela, I'm going to pivot to you next, because I think you had a unique way of approaching this with your team and how they're navigating it now as a team.
So like Chuck mentioned, we started really talking about it internally. I want to say probably the end of February, as it became more and more real. And then we went remote. I want to say it was probably the 13th of March. And I think for us, because so much of what we do is face-to-face, and we have a number of people that are out in the community, a lot of us already had access to remote capabilities. So this is a shout out to Aparo for getting our organization with this technology plan to help us, kind of build our foundation. So we were able to kind of pivot in that space. I think the challenge for us is our culture is very collegial. And so our staff thrive on connecting with one another and talking to one another and talking to volunteers. So it's been a challenge. I think it's been a challenge. We've worked through the technology glitches, but I think the human contact has been challenging for our team. So we really worked at trying to find ways organically that we could use technology and kind of mimic kind of that face-to-face. Kathy and I are probably of one brain in that, I believed in, as we were moving to this new space, to give ourselves grace. Yeah, I've used that term a lot because we knew that we weren't going to get it right, that everything wasn't going to be all lined up and we were going to have to change on the fly. And so we really gave ourselves, once we went remote, about 2 weeks just to pause. And we gave our volunteers a couple of weeks just to pause, for folks to get adjusted to their new normal. And then we started the work of figuring out how we connected with one another more effectively and connecting with our community.
Thank you very much. Kathy?
Thank you again for allowing me to be here. I think one thing that we were all dealing with was a rapidly changing landscape. We started out having staggered in office hours and some working remotely, some in the office. But when the shelter-in-place order came, we felt like we needed to allow everyone to work remotely. And you're right, Angela, grace has been the word pivot. We need to all be pivoting, but also to give ourselves grace, because I think something that we need to understand is our employees, our team, are feeling the same fear and uncertainty in all of this that the people we serve are. And dealing with mental health, we know that we need to be mindful of how our team is doing. One thing that we've started doing are weekly, and I know everyone is doing Zoom, we're doing weekly Zoom check-ins, and they're 30 minutes on Wednesday, and it's not about work. It's not how many widgets you made this week. It's about how are you doing? And one of my staff members sent a great article, and I'll share it later if you guys are interested. Some better questions to ask rather than how are you doing, to get the conversation going, because sometimes that can just be a non-starter for people. The question that I asked the team yesterday was share a book, an article, a movie, maybe a TV show that you're finding compelling right now, and everybody shared a little bit of what they were watching or reading, and it's just nice to connect with each other as humans, because that human connection right now is just so critical. And I have said let's not call it social distancing, let's call it physical distancing, because we still all need to be connected socially. And so that's been very important for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's, now that we've talked about all these important ramifications as we use that word pivot and think about how we work in this environment, let's talk about how the services that you have delivered have changed since this either 2 weeks, well, since March 16th, right, March 13th. Angela, let's start with you this time.
You know, we are really in a space of, we had a strategic plan, we had a operational plan tied to that strategic plan, and our strategic plan had deliverables and a timetable and all of that. And when this happened, one of the things that I said to my my board chair and the officers is that we have to start over. We just really, our business and our pillars of business haven't changed much in the last 3 years. And we were looking at a more refined delivery system for Girl Scouting, but this has really just upended everything. And I think part of what we're doing is really allowing ourselves to be flexible and vulnerable in this space, to think about how much we don't know, right? And so if you think about what we do, you know, we are a membership organization, and membership is determined largely by families. And what are families doing right now? Well, they're just trying to figure out how to if they're going to have a job, whether or not they're going to be homeschooling, are their kids going to ever go back to school? They're going to get out of the house. You know, how do they manage? So our services are not in the top 10 or probably the top 20 of things they're thinking about. And so depending on how we how the next couple of months go, which is our high volume time, we just recently canceled our summer camp, which is a core business for us. And that in and of itself is really causing us to think about, how do we connect? So we're looking at ideas like virtual camping. We're looking, have started some engagement with our leaders, just allowing them to unwind and talk about whatever they want to talk about. It doesn't have to be Girl Scouts. We are really focused on supporting them and connecting them to other resources if needed, like mental health of Central Carolinas if they need that. You know, we're going to come back together in May and start to figure out how we reevaluate, reskin our recruitment process, because that is tied very heavily to the school system. And so once we find out what happens in the school system, we're going to have to figure out how we drive access to parents in that space. And more importantly, for those girls and those parents who don't have digital access, we have to figure out how we're going to do an audit to determine what their needs are, right? Before we start talking about programming. So that's kind of where we are. We're starting over. This is a brand new space for us.
Wow. Wow. And I'm trying to figure out where we should go to Chuck or to go to Kathy here. I think we'll end with Chuck. We'll go to Kathy first, and then we'll go to Chuck, who's put in some technology elements that are kind of interesting. So let's go to Kathy and talk about how you've adjusted the way you're serving.
So much like Angela and the Girl Scouts, we're very used to dealing with people in a face-to-face way. I remember we had a client one time who said that when you come into MHA, you feel like you're just getting a big hug. Well, we can only do virtual hugs right now, but you know, we were doing support groups, face-to-face, one-on-one meetings with families, or our Compeer team. We're matching up a volunteer with someone dealing with a mental health diagnosis. That was all face-to-face. And then all of our trainings and youth engagement were in a face-to-face environment. And some of the things that we're experiencing, we do have some online resources that we had in place before. People can take screening tools online. And from that, we're seeing a lot of people going to the anxiety and depression screening. We're seeing an increase in those screenings. So it gives us some data about what people are experiencing right now. So we do have that, and we had that in place before all of this, but I think it does take time for us to switch gears and think that we can do these things virtually, but we really have no choice. I mean, people still need that connection and those supports. We did our first support group with parents and caregivers last week virtually, and typically we do this monthly, and they have asked for it weekly. So that tells us that they're finding value in being together and talking. We do coffee and conversation. We have our first virtual bring your own coffee Zoom meeting last week, and that was very well attended. And now the governing bodies over trainings like QPR, which is a suicide prevention training, and mental health first aid, are seeing that they have no choice but to allow us to do those virtually. We're doing QPR virtually once a week now, and mental health first aid through the National Council for Behavioral Health is just now going to a virtual instrument. So we'll be able to offer that as well. So that's encouraging. The good thing about virtual is we can reach people outside of Mecklenburg and Cabarrus. I mean, people who are interested in taking a QPR class in Raleigh or anywhere can come onto our platform and take that class. So that's a great thing that we're training more people in those skills. We are using Zoom. I see someone had a question about that. We really don't do counseling. We're not direct service providers. We're more about providing education and some parental supports, helping parents connect to resources. The other thing that we have added, I'm doing a weekly show called Mental Health Matters, bringing on a mental health expert each week. After that, we send out a survey so that we can see, is this of value to people? What other topics would they like to see? And next week, we're going to focus on youth and adolescents and how we talk to our young people and reassure them during this time. So I think it's just a matter of just trying to decide what you can realistically do and make an impact, and what you've got to leave to the side. And so that's what we've had to do. And one thing I would say, going back to staff, the first few weeks that we did their check-ins, I felt like people were down, but as people began to be able to adapt to this new way of doing things, I think they felt more uplifted that, yes, I'm still relevant, I'm still valuable to the community, I can still help in this way. So
that's great. That's great. Chuck, you had some things in place prior to this, some technology tools that made this journey a little unique for your team. Tell us a little bit about how you have pivoted and the results of how your services have changed or adapted in this new environment.
We did have some tools in place already. I was thinking about when Angela was talking, when she said, they're not in the top 10 of what people are thinking about right now. Well, I think we're in the top 2. And so we've gotten a heavy influx of people that have come to us. And in fact, we are operating at a much, much higher output right now than we even were 2 months ago. So we incorporated Teams over a year ago into our process. And my staff gave me a significant amount of eye rolling throughout that, but because we work in a fairly small area, we're all together. But so you can say something through a door or over a cubicle wall, or you can put it in Teams. But we were already there, and so we were able to really quickly create a Teams channels that allowed us to take our work that we do and compartmentalize it into places so that it's really well organized, and we can always track back. Anybody on the team can track back and see what's happening with any individual client, any individual situation through that. So that has been invaluable to us. We also were already incorporating some items like an online form generator, so that we could create forms that we could send them the link, they could give us information and submit it back, and it goes to email distribution to the people who need it. So we were already using that platform. We were already using a text for counseling platform. We had been testing it, but it was working out very well for us. And so all of those things were already in place to do. And when we went remote, we realized fairly quickly that we were going to be answering a lot of questions about the other things that were out there, all the financial questions. So we created just its own text to counseling platform that enabled people to come in and go into a digital queue. And then we were able to assign people out of the queue. And so nobody got a busy signal, nobody got a voicemail box full, nobody got anything of that. They all got attention, and everyone's getting attention same day back. So that enabled us to really take a huge volume and parse it out. We enlisted about 15 or 20 volunteers to help us. We coached them up and trained them. The other major thing that happened to us was
Chuck, before you go on to that, I've got a couple people who are asking what document platform and what form generator you use at Commonwealth.
The form generator we use is called Email Me Form. And there's several of them out there. FormStack is probably the most popular one, but Email Me Form is a great platform that you can use. And
FormStack is the other one, FormStack?
FormStack is another good one. And there's several. I mean, I think even Google has a form creator, but Email Me Form just is an easy one to use and very intuitive in how you can build those forms out. And so the other thing that happened to us is we applied for, we wanted to be a part of the response fund. And so we applied for a grant in the first round of funding from the COVID-19 response fund, and we're given loan capital that we could make no interest loans to people who were in the restaurant, hospitality, service industries who had been laid off. And so once we put that in place, we kind of morphed into a completely different organization, doing all the things that we do, the counseling by phone and by video conferencing, the loan application process, we streamlined, and we streamlined the loan approval process. We put this new product in place. And then finally, what we ended up doing is funding those loans electronically. So we fund them either through PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo, or we can literally overnight a check to someone. But all of that's done. We're not writing any checks. We're using all of our bill pay at our bank, overnighting funds to people and getting it out. So my staff of 8 people, we left our offices on March the 16th. I have seen Mary Quinn, our Director of Financial Education, 2 times since then when she went to Goodwill and got our mail and brought me the mail 2 times. Other than that, none of our staff has laid eyes on each other or been in the same place other than being in Zoom conferences. So we went completely out of the office, virtual and remote. It's been kind of crazy.
Chuck, how have your constituents responded to some of these tools and these services and the pivot that you've done, a significant pivot? And to Angela's point, how are you reaching across the digital divide because I would imagine that a good segment of those that you're serving may have challenges, connecting, getting to internet, getting to something that they can access. How do they know how to do that?
Here's a really interesting thing. We started observing this about a year ago. We sit down and work through budgets with people and household spending, and we ask them where their money goes. And one of the things that we started noticing about a year ago is that a lot of people, not everyone had cable and not everyone had home internet. Not everyone had these things, but almost everyone that we worked with had a smartphone. And so we started taking note of that and saying anything that we can convert that can work off of the smartphone, most of our clients are going to be able to interact with us. And we found that to be true in this. Everything that we do it with response design, because that way, if we have a website, our website, our forms, our applications, everything are responsive design so that they will work on the same way on a screen, on a phone, on a tablet, anything they happen to be working on, they work. So the response from our clients has been, I haven't seen anything other than satisfaction from them. The one thing that I was talking with our board chair this morning, she's one of our volunteers, and she's been making calls as well and following up with people. So my board has gotten very involved in this. I've got about half my board on the volunteer team, and that's been great. But she was saying this morning about, and Kathy could probably speak to this better than I can, but the fact that showing up in someone's life, even if you can't solve the problem, the fact that they'll ask you for help and you call them back and talk to them on the phone, that in itself is healing for the people going through this, even if we cannot solve their immediate financial problem. So I think the response has been great. I think it's been great.
I just love that quote, Chuck. I think I got to find a way to put that out there. That's just showing up in someone's life, even if you can't provide the total answer, is healing. I just think that's powerful. And a perfect segue to you, Kathy.
To me?
Yes, he referenced something to you about, your understanding of how just being there is really a part of the mental
I do
health
think
piece.
that it doesn't matter if you're somebody struggling with a mental health diagnosis, or I think all of us right now are experiencing some mental anguish and again, that fear and uncertainty of what the future is going to look like a few months from now. So you're right, just human connection, whether it's by phone or through Zoom or and just listening. And I would go back to our teams as well. This is critical for them too. I mean, if we're not ensuring that they're okay, then we're not going to function well in meeting our mission. So another one of my staff shared with me another article that said that people actually were working more hours in the remote environment than when they're in the office. And I think we need to be aware of compassion fatigue and burnout, remote burnout, Zoom burnout. There's some new issues that'll probably arise out of this as we're working with our teams. And so I think we need to be sure and make sure they're taking breaks, going for that walk, being out in nature and practicing self-care as well.
I think it's really important. They're definitely important. Someone on a different one of these webinars, we talked about the importance of vacation, of ensuring that your staff still know it may not be the most exciting vacation of your life if you're staying home, but you still need that break from work to remain productive and to remain healthy, mentally healthy.
I still look forward to the weekend.
No joke.
Absolutely.
I absolutely look forward to the weekend.
Yeah.
So Angela, a little bit about that. How have your constituents reacted? You're a little bit different environment, very high touch, less technology in the touch. You're not asking for forms to fill out to, get access to funding. How have your constituents reacted to the efforts that you have put in place to try to still serve them?
I think that, as we went remote, and had to stay in place order. I think the pause that we took with our volunteers was really critically important. And when we checked back in with them, we did phone calls. We went old school. We called our families and we called our leaders and we said, "How you doing? What can we do for you?" Because usually we're in the mode of, "Hey, we need this form, we need this thing, you need to check in, you need to register, you need to do this." We didn't do that the first 2 weeks. And they really, what we're hearing now from them is they really, really appreciated the time to attend to their high needs, right? To attend to their finance situation, to attend to what's going on in school with their kids and to figure all of that out. I think what's interesting now that we're hearing is as we are rolling out what I would call bad news, as events are canceled, as camp is canceled, as from a national standpoint, other councils were in the middle of their cookie sale. So there was lots and lots of bad news that is rolled out. What we are finding with our constituency is because we've never stopped talking to them, that as we are communicating something, we always follow up with a phone call. When we announced on Tuesday that we were not going to do summer camp, either day or resident camp, that was a highly emotional time for our team, and highly emotional for volunteers who've done that most of their lives with Girl Scouts. But what we got back was, thank you guys for letting us know first. And thank you guys for calling us and letting us know how can we be helpful to you. And so we, I think by not rolling over them with our process, it's worked really well for us. And I think it will work really well for us as we begin to re-engage, as people begin to turn and open. And I don't mean necessarily open the state. What I mean is be open to the experience of thinking about other than, how am I gonna go through this homeschool thing? So we've been hearing a lot of positive praise. And I think, we encourage our team, especially, and Kathy brings up so much, a good point, that we've been talking to our team about making sure that you take advantage of EAP, because this is stressful.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The anxiety is high. And for those of us who deliver services, taking on everybody else's problem is a big deal. So I am really paying really close attention to my leadership team and to our members to make sure that they are taking care of themselves, so that they can then go back out into community and pay it forward in a really supportive way.
Hey, Angela, have y'all thought about, had a light bulb, any kind of virtual camp, maybe
Yes.
I've been seeing a lot of
Yes.
sports in the living room and things. Maybe
Yes.
Me too.
families could do a virtual camp
Yes.
out or
We
something.
are actually going to be rolling that out in the next couple of weeks. The good thing about being part of a network of organizations is that we have so many wonderful councils that have kind of debuted this. So they
Yeah.
can sign up and go. But we are absolutely going to be doing some virtual camp things. Sing-alongs seem to be popular. You won't see me on those, but I support those too. Yeah.
But you could run a virtual yoga camp. I just attended one of those yesterday. Somebody sent out a link. I think it was the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce sent out a link for a yoga session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, just kind of the final, we are interesting as we are thinking about our programming going forward. We're talking to our families about what they want, not necessarily what's part of our Girl Scout package, but what do you, and how can we support you, and what does that look like?
Can you sell cookies online?
So for the purpose of this digital thing, we are done.
Okay, good.
Let me just say, overdone. Thank you very much, community. I will say that there is a national effort for those other councils that got stuck in the middle. So there is some information on our website. So if you want to support other councils in other areas of the country, you can buy them online.
Okay.
Still get your cookies.
Not in Charlotte.
Okay.
So I have a couple more questions for the panelists, but I want to encourage folks online with us, if you have questions, particularly about operationalizing services from these three distinct kinds of services in the community, to just put it in the chat, let us know, and we'll make sure you are all muted. I should have said that at the beginning. I'm sure you figured it out. But you certainly can put a question there, and we'll make sure that they get to it. We have one, actually. Angela, do you have anything parents have signed that allow your volunteers or staff to connect with the children virtually?
I didn't hear the last part of your question. Sorry.
Do you have anything parents have signed that allow your volunteers or staff to connect with the children virtually?
Yes. So what we do at the beginning of every year is do a waiver for all of our parents and that participate. So that's virtually, as well as using likenesses of that. I will also say that as we are stepping into this virtual space, we are looking at our protocol around cybersecurity, because that is a big deal, particularly when you have children that are in this virtual space. And so we have gotten a lot of good best practices from some of our sister councils in Alabama, who have a whole SOPM, we call them, around what you can do, privacy, and those things. So those are one of those things that we, which is why, frankly, that we haven't rolled out completely in the virtual space, because we want to make sure that children stay safe online.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a question for Chuck. how do you go over budgets and interviews with clients remotely?
Well, about 6 months ago, we incorporated a new budgeting technique that used Email Me form. And so what we're able to do is, prior to the appointment that we would make with anyone, we would send them the link to a form that enabled them to put their data in and submit it to us. And then we created an Excel spreadsheet that we can use to populate the data into, and have not only their budget, but their fixed expense ratios to their income, and a lot of other calculations that are built in there. Once we have that, we're able to just save it as a PDF and email it back to them. And then we have a tool that we can walk through with them on the budget sheet. But we also, we can walk through that either using Zoom, which we've used with some clients, or if they have it in front of them and we have a copy in front of us, we can just walk down through and say, here are the places where we believe that you're going to have to put some attention to. And so it's, we're learning how to do that. We would normally have done that face to face, but it's surprisingly effective over the phone and over video.
Interesting. Another kind of tactical question: is anyone using DocuSign right now for any of the services, any of the agreements between people and services?
We're looking at it because we're in the middle of, in addition to being, remote, we're in the middle of a big real estate transaction. And boy, would DocuSign be really helpful to. So we're, after this process, we're absolutely going to adopt DocuSign.
We looked into it, and what we opted for, again, and I sound like there's an old joke that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I realize sometimes I sound like that with Email Me form, but what we decided to do instead of using DocuSign is we just created an Email Me form that said the loan. We were able to say the loan number. We would send them documentation about their loan, and then they would say, put the loan number in here. And when you submit this back, we're going to treat this as your digital signature. The thing about that, and it works very well for us, the thing about that, it would not hold up in a court of law. So a bank would never do that. But we're not a bank, so we're never going to have to take that to a court of law. So it just is an agreement between us and our clients that they've borrowed the money, they're agreeing to pay it back, and that's really all we're looking for anyway. So that works for us.
And I've used DocuSign. Others have made me use it, so we haven't used it outbound, but I've used it in other environments, and it was very easy as a user to do so. For what that's worth, feedback to that question. So I have a question for the three panelists, each one of you. How have you seen this COVID-19 timeframe, this stay-at-home timeframe really, affect the number of services? Have your services gone up? Have they gone down? Have they stayed flat? What are you seeing out there as far as needs of the services that you have traditionally offered? Anyone can start.
Well, for us, I think we've kind of stayed level as we were ramping up to virtual. Things were kind of just trying to maintain the contacts that we had. But I see some things maybe ramping up as we do our education virtually, where more people can tap into that. The unfortunate thing, mental health first aid is an 8-hour class. So that's going to be difficult for people to hang on for that long. So in some ways I see things hopefully staying level, and then others maybe ramping up.
I think because we're in youth services, we tend to plan out, we used to tend to plan out a year in advance, and we're very event driven, program event driven. So as this is rolled out, we've had to cancel virtually all of our programs that we had planned. So I definitely see a decline. What that will look like in the fall will be very driven in some form by what the school system does. And I use the school system as a bellwether only because parents, that's where parents start. When they can get their children back in school, then they can make decisions about other things that they want their kids to be involved in. But we have definitely seen a tremendous drop in activity for our membership?
Well, we have gone the other direction. We have, our counseling volume has gone up about 400%.
Mm.
And so we have, now we have changed, we're doing it differently. So we're able to put people through a slightly different model than we do, but it has gone up that much. And so we have taken what was 3 full-time financial advisors and supplemented them with our director of education and with about 15 or 20 volunteers to handle the load. So we've coached up people, and we're triaging them differently so that we know that we're sending certain people to certain places based on what we know about them in the contact form that we've done. As far as our loans, normally we would make a heavy month of loans for us would be 15 to 16 loans in a month. Yesterday, we made our 100th loan in the month of April, on April 22nd. So we've got 8 days left. And that volume is, 500% higher. Different process, but still the same things happen in that process. You still have to get an application. You have to evaluate the application. You have to approve it, get the documentation, get identification, get all of those things. And so we've skyrocketed in the other ways. The other thing that we did in the midst of all that, why not? I mean, why not just make it even harder? We brought in 2 new staff members and converted the entire operation to Spanish language as well. So I have 3 bilingual staff members now, and we're working in the Latino community as effectively as we have been working in the English-speaking community. So we've expanded and created an entirely new capability in the midst of all this, which has also been just amazing to see happen and to pull that community in. We got the absolute right people to do it. And so that's been our story.
Well, Chuck, this is totally aside, and we'll take it offline if you're interested, but I just had an interview with a fantastic gentleman who is bilingual. If you are looking for new employees, he does not work for what I need him to do, but I'll bet he would fit in.
Let's talk offline.
Yep. And so one thing, one of our participants recommended tactically HelloSign as an excellent option and much cheaper than DocuSign. And that this is a corporate partner who's on our line with us today and said that they use that. So for those of you who are thinking about DocuSign, also take a look at HelloSign. It might be a cheaper option. And I was going to shift into talking a little bit here at the end of our conversation about funding and how you're seeing it affect your funding, how you're able to perhaps increase funding, or maybe funding is declining. The question specifically for Girl Scouts is, if grants are used, how have funders responded to the change of services, and how are you navigating those expectations?
So the way in which we are funded, our primary driver is our product sale, or cookie sale. So in terms of timing this year, we were able to kind of close that out before we went virtual. I think where we are now is we have not changed our philosophy in terms of the funds that we go after, because we're interested, the funds that we go after are about providing access to fragile neighborhoods and girls and families in those neighborhoods. So to your point, Chuck, we also have had a strong partnership with the Latino community, and I have two bilingual staff members who that's their job, is to establish trust with families and to deliver services along the Eastern Quarter and in the northern part of our region. And so, in terms of our funding design, we are still very much going to ask funders to support those families. That has not changed. That will not change. If anything, we will need more resources, because we do rely on volunteers to deliver some of that, but we also know that volunteers are stretched. So that's going to be a staff delivery. And so we will need more resources to make sure and ensure that our families who don't have digital access and don't have a way to be a part of us, have the funding to do so. And so that is what we're talking to our partners about, whether that's United Way or corporate foundations, our individual donors. We're asking for the same thing.
Anybody else have any thoughts about funding and how this is impacting, maybe to use that word again, pivoting the language or the approach you're using to achieve funding? Or, is there a cliff coming? Is there that kind of thing?
I think that just to a couple of our funders have really relaxed their outcomes. They recognize that it's going to impact our outcomes, and so they're saying put it to general operating support where you need it right now. And I greatly appreciate them pivoting as well and being flexible. The thing I always caution staff and board is not to chase money. There's some funds out there, and we're trying to figure out, is there a way for us to apply for some of these dollars within the framework? As you said, Angela, our mission is our mission. And we know we've got to change how we provide service in some way during this time. But our biggest thing right now is our biggest fundraiser was scheduled for May 14th. And we've decided we're going to go toward totally virtual with our Wake Up for Wellness breakfast and see how that works. And so we did have to pivot very quickly with that. So, but as far as grants go, we had a lot that we had submitted already, and we continue to submit grant applications based on what we think we'll be doing in the next fiscal year.
So I would concur with all of that we have continued to write grants, and we get a lot of our funding that way. Our funders have also been very generous to us, as with Kathy, that they've made some programmatic dollars that we've received unrestricted. And we are, I don't want to imply that we are awash with cash, but we feel fairly secure at the moment. But I've been very open to all of my funders, and I've talked to each of them a couple of times, and had conversations with them, and been very open to them that I don't know. I don't know what it looks like in a year, in 2 years. For us and for what we do, this is not going to go away when the quarantine and it ends. That's not going to be the end of it for us. That it's only going to be, in some ways, the beginning of the next phase of this for us.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have people who are going to need financial counseling for a long time. And so I have, as I said, been very honest to say, if you can give us additional funding that we can put in reserve, and you're fine with us putting that in reserve, then please do. And I'll make it board restricted. I'll tell you exactly how we plan to do it, but I just don't know. I don't know what the future is going to be. And I think being honest with your funders and your donors is the best thing to say.
Absolutely agree. I'll weigh in a little bit on this too. We're a little different because we're a capacity serving organization. So we serve nonprofits, and we don't have that direct service component. Like Angela's model, we had finished a lot of our fundraising, not finished it, it's never finished, but our fiscal year was pretty much about 90% of our fundraising efforts happen earlier in the year. And so from a financial standpoint, strictly looking at our numbers, we're in an enviable spot right now. The issues for us are going to come later. Will our funding model still work? And we're trying to pivot that ourselves, trying to figure out how we bring in funds in different ways so that we're not so reliant on the event stream of funding, which is really the biggest part of our funding, and that's face-to-face. It's hard to amount something significant for networking purposes, which is what, like cookies are the power behind Girl Scouts. Networking is the power behind Aparo's work. And so networking doesn't work if it's not face-to-face when you're talking 600 people. I mean, you can't do that.
And I would say that's important for any nonprofit executive, networking and connecting with partners and funders, and we're all kind of, our hands are somewhat tied in this environment.
Right. There's only so much you can do.
I know we can continue to reach out to funders, but it's a little different from being with other nonprofit executives. And I'm glad we have this opportunity to share, but being together is nice, and I miss that.
Me too. So we've got about 8 minutes left, and what I'm going to do is ask each of the panelists if there's anything else that they'd want to share, specifically related to if we presume that the folks on the phone are wondering, how can I make this pivot to remote services for my constituents even that much stronger if I'm struggling? You know, what is some great winning takeaway that you had, or maybe painful learning moment that you took away, which would, you know, save somebody to have to dive into that moment. But before I do that, I just want to go out to the attendees and say, if there's another question, we're wrapping up now, so this would be the time to put it in our chat line, and we'll make sure that the panelists get that question. So I throw that question to you all. As you wrap up, is there any big takeaway you'd want to share to help people who are on this journey to provide remote services, either a big win or a big scary loss that you had to adjust to? It's okay if you don't. No pressure.
I think I would just say we all need to just stay focused on our mission and decide what we can and can't do in this environment, and be okay with imperfection. And again, as Angela's led us off with, give ourselves some grace.
I would just offer discipline and flexibility. Discipline to your mission, but flexibility in how you deliver it. Our lane is supporting girls and young women in leadership capacity. How we do that, we can be very flexible in, but we're not going to change lanes, because I think it's important to live out your mission. And I think being able to be savvy enough to have that partnership with your board, who might be getting nervous, quite frankly, and talking to them about being advocates for your mission, in addition to being continue to be supportive and donating, maybe at a higher level. I think that is not something that anybody should shy away from. Not only supporting your organization, but getting out there and seeing what the needs are in the community and making a bigger gift to our community overall.
I would just say this, that no one that we interact with from any level, whether it's a funder, a board member, a client, or an associate, a staff member, or another nonprofit, no one is going to be surprised that you're having to adapt what you do. We're all in the same boat on this. We're all trying to figure this out. And so I think it's really important to try to take this opportunity. I would encourage everyone to take this opportunity to try as much technology as you can, because everyone knows that we're all trying different things. So even if you try it and it doesn't work, you can say, oh, well, I was trying it to better serve my clients and it didn't work, as opposed to 2 or 3 months ago when you might have tried it and they would say, why are you trying this? Couldn't we just do it this way? Everyone knows that. So I would encourage everyone to employ as much new technology as they can during this period, because you're going to get that grace we talk about, because everyone knows we're trying new things.
Well, that's a wonderful way to segue to me for a wrap up. If you do want to try new technology and you want a partner to walk alongside you with it, don't hesitate to reach out to Aparo, because that's one of the main reasons we're here, is to support you on that journey. And Chuck and Kathy and Angela, thank you so very much for taking your time out of your day to share what you've learned on this journey. You have been really great stories about how you've navigated this in very different ways, and also very successfully. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for everybody for joining us. You will be getting updates. There was a question about security comments that Chuck made, and the tool names and things. We will send that all out afterwards. Kathy, I think you were asked to send questions besides how are you?
Yes, I will send that.
Demo that follow up.
Mhm.
Thank you all so much. Stay safe, and
Yes.
forward to speaking again next week. If anybody would like to join us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have great weekends.
You
You
too.
too.